Conflicts between husbands and wives are common enough, but not everyone ends up with an unconscious neighbor. Several years ago, a woman from Oklahoma was getting dressed for work, and she asked her husband to help her zip up the back of her dress as he was walking by. The day would have continued normally if her husband hadn't been feeling a little bit more playful than usual. The man reached for the zipper and grabbed it. He pulled it up, then down, then up, then down, then up, then down, and that's where he left it. I imagine that he chuckled to himself as he walked away. Well, his wife wasn't laughing. Later that day, when she arrived home from work, she saw two legs sticking out from underneath her husband's car. Her eyes caught the zipper, and all the emotions from that morning came flooding back into her. Impulsively, she reached for the fly and grabbed it. She pulled it down, then up, then down, then up, then down, and that's where she left it. Quite satisfied with herself, she trotted into the house where she saw her husband standing in the kitchen. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "What do you mean, what am I doing here?" he replied. "You're supposed to be under the car." "No, that's our neighbor Joe. I asked him to come and take a look at something for me." When the husband learned what she did, they rushed to find their neighbor out cold. He was so shocked by the zipper experience that he smashed his head against the underside of the car and knocked himself unconscious. The expression close quarters originally referred to the space on the deck of a ship that was covered with thatched wood to offer sailors some protection during a battle. The word close was a variant of the word closed. The space offered a barrier for protection, but the expression eventually came to mean close enough to fight in hand-to-hand combat. When we share space with other people, when we vie in tight quarters of one kind or another, conflict often seems to be a foregone conclusion. On some level, it should be expected. And when worked through, conflict can be a positive source for growth and understanding. But left unattended, conflict can turn a marriage into a trap. It can destroy a relationship, and it can cause a soul to turn sour. How can we work through the inevitable conflicts that will come our way? James is going to share some deep insight to navigate around these dangerous waves. Read James chapter 4, verses 1 through 5. What is the source of conflict? What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have. So you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want. So you quarrel and you fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity with God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that He jealously longs for the Spirit He has caused to dwell in us? Chances are, if you asked a husband and a wife, a brother and a sister, or a parent and a child why they're fighting, they might first respond by explaining the other person's wrong. And that's why the claim we find here is so surprising and counterintuitive. We go to battle against each other because of the desires at work within us. You desire, but you do not have, James says, so you kill. That second statement seems to be an even more surprising jump. We'll take that up in a moment, but let's not overlook the beautiful insight of James's first statement. The simple source behind most conflict is a desire unattained or an unmet expectation. If James was sitting down with a married couple in his church office, one of the first questions he might ask both parties is, "What do you want that you are not getting?" A wife might say, "I just want to be able to paint the living room crimson." A husband might say, "I just want to add on to our garage for my Ford Mustang." There would be no conflicts at play if there weren't also competing values. The husband might respond by saying, "Red should go on a barn, not on a wall inside of our house." And the wife might say in return, "You know, the barn seems like a great place for a Mustang too." Most conflict stems from a collision of diverging interests. James takes those clashing desires a step further. so you kill. To most people, his conclusion might sound absurd. Certainly, murder could be an extreme outcome of an unmet expectation. But it seems like a gross overgeneralization to apply this to all of his readers. There's no hint of actual murders taking place in the communities that James is writing to, so he must mean something different. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder,' and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." This provocative statement gives us a better place to understand James. Let's be clear, harboring anger and resentment toward a fellow believer is not the same as murder. If it was, we should all consider turning ourselves into local authorities to receive our just due. Murder and hate are vastly different sins in scope. But murder and hate share the same path or the same train. I call this the train of dehumanization. We dehumanize when we undermine the God-given worth of a person because of some personal agenda or misplaced value. We've all gotten on this train at one time or another, whether we've known it or not. Some get on the train of dehumanization and exit at Anger Avenue. Others step off the train at Abusive Boulevard. The final stop of this train is murder. Not everyone gets off at the same stop. But James boldly tells his readers that their unmet desires lead to murder because he wants them to know that whether they fight, abuse, neglect, steal, yell, hate, or murder, they are all on the same train. Dehumanization results when personal desires take precedence over a healthy relationship. But we learn from James that these desires weren't all that innocent to begin with either. They covet, James says, and they don't get what they covet because they either fail to ask the one who gives every perfect gift or they request selfishly. When you ask, James says, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. You may not find yourself particularly wrapped up in a physical item, but chances are that you found yourself wanting something so bad it has become an idol. Even a desire for something good can be turned into something evil if one's motive is simply to achieve that good for their own pleasures. The very same thing that stands behind our conflicts with people puts us at odds with God. James continues, "You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity with God?" He says that God jealously longs for the Spirit He has caused to dwell in us. In other words, God loves us with the jealous love of a husband or wife. He loves the innermost part of us, our spirits He has set within our bodies. But we have so easily given ourselves to another husband. The desires of the world have occupied the primary place of our hearts. But God has made our hearts for something so much more. Not every conflict comes from some selfish desire. Certainly we all have misunderstandings and some conflicts may simply result from a difference in opinion on what is best in important matters. But conflict always starts with a desire, and James unpacks that beautifully. He invites us to consider our part in any given conflict by simply acknowledging our desire in it. If that passion is selfish, acknowledging it may open up a door for us to reconsider how we might better serve the relationship and glorify God. But all of that is easier said than done. It's not always clear why we want what we want, and it's not easy to change those desires even if we know they're self-serving. This is where James gives his readers a little hope. Read James chapter 4, verses 6 through 10. But it gives us more grace. That's why the scripture says, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. In the face of conflict-producing desires, James says, but he gives us more grace. When many think of God's grace, the first thing that comes to mind is his forgiveness. But grace is simply an unmerited gift in the Bible. It could refer to God's forgiveness, but grace may refer to a gift from God of any kind. The gift is not clearly identified in this portion of the letter, but James is most likely referring to the power God gives us to maintain loving hearts centered on Him that produce peace instead of conflict. James quotes Proverbs 3:34 to remind his readers that God shows favor to the humble, those who have submitted themselves to God and cried out to Him in their need. The devil wants nothing more than for us to give our hearts to anything else. So James warns his readers to resist the devil and come near to God for change. Purify your hearts, he tells them. A single-minded devotion to God is an antidote to the selfish desires that pull us in different directions and stir conflict in our spiritual families. When we turn to God and covet Him alone, He gives us the power to overcome selfish desires and bring peace to our relationships. Now it's your turn. Read 1 Peter 5:5-9, and answer the following questions. 1 Peter 5:5-11 shares several similarities with James chapter 4, verses 6-10. What are some things they have in common? What are some key words or expressions from 1 Peter 5:5-11 that might also help us respond to conflict in a godly manner?